Hey, good morning, everyone. We appreciate everybody being here on Tuesday, in the middle of the day. Hopefully, you're getting to spend a little bit of time inside and outside of away from the hot weather, the summer a little bit, get a little bit of a break. We're excited today. We're going to talk a little bit about weevils in the landscape. They can be quite the pest and irritant for landscape professionals. There's several that are out there that are causing problems for us that have been for a number of years, and it's always nice to kind of reintroduce them and talk a little bit about them. So that's what we'll do today. Today, there are three of us that will be presenting. We have Dr. Anita Neal. She is the Southeast Extension Director, and also she actually did a lot of the research for Sri Lankan weevil, and so she'll talk to us about that and get really in depth, which is exciting to hear that. And then Ralph Mitchell, who is the County Extension Director in Charlotte County and also Extension Agent, Horticulture Extension Agent. And so we're really excited to have him as well to talk about palmetto weevils and all the damage that they can do as well. And then I will be talking about, I'm Kara Kruger. I am Palm Beach County Environmental Horticulture Extension Agent, and I will be talking about Mexican bromeliad weevil and touch a little bit then on sea grape weevil, which is causing a lot of problems for our sea grapes and really for our pigeon plums down here in South Florida. And so if we want to get it kicked off, we will start with a pre-test, and hopefully we all then learn the right answers. If you don't already know the answers to them, then you can, throughout this morning, we will learn the right answers to all these Weevil questions. So let me launch the pre-quiz. If everyone wants to take a few minutes to answer these questions. You do not have to know the answers, but answer to the best of your ability. Give it a few more seconds here for anybody who might not have answered yet. And if you can't see the poll or the quiz, it might be that you have pop-up blockers that are stopping you from accessing it. I think we'll go ahead and end the poll, and then the same questions will come up at the end. And so hopefully, if and then we'll go over them at the end as well. But thank you all for who did participate. We really appreciate you um, showing up today, and also um, participating in the quizzes. So we'll kick it off then with Dr. Anita Neal talking about Sri Lankan weevils. And if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat, and then we'll have some questions then at the end of the session as well. But take it away, Anita.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's glad to Tuesday. I hope you all had a great weekend. I know mine was. Mine was up in Georgia in the nice mountain area. Still wasn't really cool though. It was very warm. Anyways, we will talk about the Sri Lankan weevil, and some of you may or may not know the larger name for it, of course, is the Latin name, and the Latin name is Miloceras undicimentalis undatus. So it's quite a mouthful. So that's why we like to use the word Sri Lankan weevil. When I first started working with this insect, my husband kept thinking I was saying Miley Cyrus because Miloceras is very similar to that. And I had to explain the difference to him. So that was just kind of a fun thing that, I remembered very well. So when I did my study, it was on looking at the distribution, the biology of the insect, because there wasn't a lot of information on it, as well as trying to manage it in our landscape, which is what kind of we're focusing on now. So I'm going to move this along. So when we talk about the insect here, I'm going to go into the introduction, kind of a little information about it, the distribution of where we were finding it, biology, and of course management, which is what's important. But when we look at this insect, a little bit about the introduction. It was found in Florida, in 2000. So it was actually down in South Florida. So we can say that most of the it was on a citrus tree. So there's a lot of things that like citrus. Unfortunately here in Florida, this is another insect that was found on citrus. And you can see in the pictures here, there's a lot of plants, over 27 different plant families that this insect feeds on. It also feeds on Brazilian pepper. It also feeds on carrot wood. It also feeds on a lot of our plants that we consider pest plants. But unfortunately, this insect is a generalist, so it's not specific to Melaleuca. It's not specific to Australian pine, which would have been a really good thing if it had been. But you can see there's some examples of some of the plant materials that it does prefer. And those are theirs there. So it's non-native. It is a species of concern because it not only affects our landscape plants, but it affects vegetables, and it even affects some of our tree varieties as well. So it's also known by several other names, the Asian gray weevil and the yellow-headed ravenous weevil. So I thought that was kind of cool that it has that kind of a name. And as you can see here, over 150 different host plants. And this was when I was doing my research, so there could be a lot more than that. And then again, 27 different families plant families. So you can see that here. So a little bit about the distribution. This went as far as you can see from to 2015. There are some other counties that have been identified since then where the insect has been found. And I used the data from DPI as well as reaching out to some of the extension agents in the areas to find out where a lot of these things are now. So they are now in all those areas that are white, that are surrounded by the colors, do now have the Melaleuca weevil there. And you can see it happened gradually over different times. Of course, the very first ones where it was actually discovered in Palm Beach, and you can see there, Broward and Miami-Dade. The Keys are also part of that. Monroe has definitely been infested with it. And it does have a little bit of a timeline, so you can see that comparison there too. And you can see here, Pompano Beach was the very first place it was detected. And then in 12 counties within 9 years, and later in 27 counties. So you can see quite a few. And then now there's even more. It's in like 35 counties. And they've actually found it, believe it or not, in other areas. So there's that method of transportation that a lot of our insects do evolve, whether it's by ships or whether it's by soil and containers and things of that nature. So we'll kind of go over that. And this is one of the ways we can look at that. This is the biology of the insect. So the eggs that you can see at the very top left-hand picture are the eggs that are laid. They come out as a really kind of creamy white. And then as they mature, they turn this browner color. And you can see that there's actually If I can put to the pointer there, you can see that there's actually where they've emerged. There's a little cut hole in the actual egg where the larva will emerge, and then the larva, of course, has different life stages. So you have the first instar, and then you have the pupil that will actually, this actually will go into the soil as it emerges. It goes into the soil, then pupates in the soil, and then emerges as an adult. So you can see that there. And then the eggs are laid directly on the soil surface. So you'll see that lots of times the adults will be up above. They may drop their eggs. They may land down to the soil and then lay eggs. And they're usually laid in clusters like you see here. And then they burrow into the soil and feed on the plant roots, which obviously we can't very well see that sort of thing. And then they pupate in the soil. And then it's actually the what you're seeing here is the pupal form as before it forms into there. So you can see that it actually has an earthen cell. You can't see around that when it's first seen in the soil. So if you were to pull soil apart where you think they might be, that's what you would find. And then the adult. So some of the things we can differentiate, we have the neonate, which is the one that just emerged, the first instar, and you can see the time frame that we're looking at. And this is all based on my research as to how long these different stages seem to take. So we can see the fourth instar. These are those nice meaty guys that some people that do entomophagy like to eat. So that's where you would go with a bigger guy. And then here's the instar measurements that are there too, which are kind of hard to see because they're tiny. But you can see fourth instars in 13 days. So it's pretty quick how they go through their development. And then some of the things that kind of differentiate this weevil from maybe some of the other weevils that are around is the adult head and rostrum are yellow, which is where it gets that one yellow ravenous name from. And then you can see the antenna originate near the apex of the rostrum. So that's where the very front part of that rostrum. And then the elytra are actually broader than the prothorax. So you have your prothorax is right behind that. So you have the elytra just slightly that, and they're also the humeri, or what they call shoulders, are distinctly angled. So that's what differentiates it from other weevils that are very similar, like this one here, where you're seeing the two different ones where you've got the weevil Myeloceras, and then you've also got the little leaf notcher. Little leaf notcher does not have those shoulders that are angled, and it does not have the other parts that are similar. It also does not have the tritindate. These are the three little spears on its legs that are differentiating it as well. So those are some of the things that are kind of different with each other. And then knowing the difference between a male and female, the females are larger in nature, and the males are smaller. And you can see there is also a way to tell them apart by turning them over and looking at this shading area that's much greater on the female than it is on the male. So it extends way past the mesosternum on the female, where the male, it only goes part of the way there. So those are some other differentiations that you can see. I went on to look at some of the cold tolerance because my concern was in seeing it moving from South Florida up, how far would it go and how could it survive? So I looked at different methods of doing exposure, and I thought over time, could they, kind of acclimate themselves to the temperatures we have in Fort Pierce compared to down further south. So I looked at the survival of the weevils in the summer that were collected versus some that were collected in the winter time. And then also I looked at the leaf consumption. In other words, were they able to consume more food if they were exposed to more different temperatures? The difference is the RCE is the repeated cold exposure. So in other words, they were exposed to cold and then for 2 hours, and then they were warmed back up. And they were exposed to cold and then warmed back up. So that's where that repeated was different than sustained, where they were sustained for several hours before they were warmed back up. So there was a lot more damage when they were sustained for a longer period of time than if they were repeatedly exposed over time. So you can see that that's where you can see the number of adults died much quicker when they were exposed to a continued cold exposure versus a repeated up and down warming cold. And then the same is similar to When we look at the consumption of the weevils, obviously the controls did really well, much better. But when you look at the again the exposure to continued cold, it was very difficult to for them to continue eating. So you can see that there. And I also did some niche modeling, which is looking at the potential for distribution. So plugging in those coordinates of where the weevils were found in Florida, and that's the little blue dots you can see there, I was able to extrapolate where it could possibly move to based on the temperature and the different things that we looked at. So they were able to acclimate to colder temperatures. So based on some of the original parts I did, there was actually a little dashed line here, meaning that the temperatures would allow them to go along this dashed line. And then when I plugged in the coordinates, it shows where they're able to actually move up here. So the chances of them moving are much greater in Florida than they are in other areas, but you can see the potential is there. The area right along the coast of parts of Florida, Alabama, and even into Mississippi is the area there is what's keeping them from looking there is the actual moisture in the soil. So that moisture in the soil is heavier, the soil's heavier, and that's why they weren't projected to move into those areas. It's another way of looking at kind of how your insect might move. So then when we looked at some of the actual management of these insects, I looked at different types of chemical reactions. In other words, I looked at what kind of mortality and feeding behavior after they were exposed to biopesticides. And I looked, of course, in the lab first and then went into the field. So I used three different types of EPF or ementamopathogenic, they're fungal formulations. So you can see here I use Botanigard. Some of you may be familiar with it, which is Bavaria, which is another one was PFR, which is Iceria, and then Met 52, which is Metarhizium. So I used those, and then I used three different organic materials because I was looking at this insect for helping not only professionals in the landscape, but also homeowners. So that's why I went with things that they might be able to easily acquire. So then when I looked at the organic materials, I looked at azarangton or what we would consider Azimax here, Entrust or a spinosade, and then Pyganic, which is a pyrethrin. And then I used also a conventional insecticide product that was used, which is Sevin, and then of course distilled water for the control. And as you can see here, there's what we call lollipops or a large container, which is a petri dish with a hole cut in so that I could actually put the leaf through and the leaf would be down into a vessel to hold water. And I would spray the leaves accordingly to the chemical. And then I would add in 10 of the adults to see how their feeding would go. There was a bag over each one so that the spores from the fungicides would not, or the fungus would not go into others. So that would keep that from preventing that. And then I would check daily to see what kind of damage was done. And then you can see here that the greater mortality happened with Botanigard and in trust. So you can see there's where we had a higher mortality. In trust or spinosade was very quick with the killing effect or mortality. In Botanigard, because it is a fungus, it does take a little longer, but it did have a very strong effect. And what's kind of cool about Bavaria is the mycosis part. So all of you can see the mycosis on the insects as they were seen because the mycosis comes out of all of their little parts that come together. So any of those little extras is where that comes out. So you can see the sporulation there, then of course would spread to other insects. And then I also looked at the plant rating damage. I did this for both, for the lab and the other. And you can see I rated it on a factor that was already really done through different experiments. So you had a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 was, of course, the worst. And there's some pictures there showing you the differences between some of those. And this one picture with number 5 was actually a control where there was nothing sprayed, and they pretty much did that whole plant in. You can see the leaf consumption among the treatments. The control, they consumed a lot. Botanigard, they consumed quite a bit as well. The spinosade, not so much because remember, spinosade or spinosade, as some people call it, actually has repelling properties as well. So that's one of the things to keep in mind when we're looking at management is that some of our treatments may well actually work with a uh, something that keeps people or repellent nature rather than just a killing nature. So that's kind of nice. When we went out to the field, I used two different locations with peach trees. I used a sleeve cage, leaves on one branch on each tree was sprayed with a different chemical. I used the Bavaria, the three entomopathogenic fungicides, as well as azarangton and of course, a control. I did not use spinosade because it was very effective and there was no need to show that one anymore. So I'll give you a little bit here. Here was the mortality rates. Um, Again, with the one that was the most effective fungus was the Bavaria, and you can see here is in both experiments that was the case. Um, and you can see here the dead weevils exposed to Botanigard displayed mycosis. No mycosis was displayed with either of the other fungal formulations. So you can see it's kind of cool looking, I think. If you, I mean, it's actually quite pretty when you put it under the microscope. Um, okay, so again, plant damage, the same kind of rating system as we had before. And then the leaf consumption among treatments. Obviously, the control had the biggest leaf consumption. Botanigard was also quite the next one in line with the Botanigard. And you can see that the others did not have as much. And realize again, azarangton is more of a repellent than it is a killer. So that's another one to keep in mind is your arsenal when you're thinking about it. So looking at that, the acclimation of the adult weevils to cooler conditions is very possible. And it's, especially as we continue to get warmer and warmer temperatures, we will see them moving further north and west. We already have them also, of course, in the Caribbean, which was not an area that I was looking at, but is definitely there. Um, the movement of plant material across state lines should be inspected. I actually had someone from Washington State tell me that they had the weevil up there. It wasn't, it was moved through soil to Amazon has apparently some biodorms up there, and the plants were imported from Florida to those biodorms, and they now have the weevil up there. So then, of course, Intrust, like I mentioned, in Botanigard provides really effective control of the adult weevils. And then Intrust and Azamax are effective in reducing plant damage because of that repellent nature of them. So again, the management of these weevils should be the management should be a combination of biopesticides to increase the effectiveness and reduce pesticide resistance. So that was my kind of toolbox kit, was to use all three of them. And just kind of a fun thing, if I can get this to, nope, won't show. But this is the oh, maybe here we go. I actually took a video of the weevil in the roots in one of my flasks, and you can see the little stinker is going through. This is kind of cool. I thought, just a video showing the weevil, which we don't get to see unless we're looking through the roots. So yeah. And actually, Disney contacted me because they were having some in their land. I had to go and do an analysis there as well. So I will stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you, Anita. Does anybody have any questions?
I had one. You talked about soil moisture and how that affected the viability of them reproducing or um, I'm just wondering, is there an ideal soil moisture for them? You mentioned that in those Gulf states, Mississippi, Alabama, that the soil moisture was higher there, which prevented them from procreating. So just curious about an ideal soil moisture. Is it a higher soil moisture is an issue for them, or is it less soil moisture is better for their survival?
Anita, I think we might have lost you.
I was wondering, I was like, wait, are you waiting
Yeah, I
to
think
complete my question?
I think we lost her. It looks like she had to. It looks like she might have lost connection. I mean, it sounded like the soil moisture the soil is too dense and too moist in the Gulf Coast through the coastal Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. So, considering we have our nice sandy soils that can dry out quickly, I think that that's kind of what she was getting at, that in those areas where they have the dense, um, moist soils, that the larval stage can't survive in that. Is that does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I'm just curious if there's something, along that line that you may be able to do in the landscape to be
Oh,
able
for
to make
management
it
then.
less
The
habitable for them to, yeah.
um oh
Sorry, I heard the water in the soil, and I'm sorry, I got kicked off right at that moment. It's not that I didn't want to answer the question.
No, understood. So we was just, I heard you mention about the Gulf state areas that had more dense or moist soil, um, being less inhabitable for them. Is that something that you could consider also in the landscape to maybe prevent the spread of them? And
Yes, actually, when one of the things I noticed was when we had a lot of rain event where I would collect the insects after a large rain event, there would be less adults. And when I checked the soil, there'd be less larvae in the soil. So I do believe that wet soil, and that was when I started investigating why did that not come into that area, and I checked the soil type there, and that was one of the reasonings. And then when I realized exactly what I was finding in the field, I think there is a correlation there that they don't survive well if it's too wet.
gotcha. So then in that case, the density and moisture that more clay soils would hold probably would be less inhabitable. We've got an area that we do communities in, um, in that Fort Pierce or Port St. Lucie area that tend to be a lot more clay. Um, so it's a problem for landscape even. So I assume that's probably why you don't find a lot of more incidents of them in those areas.
That's very likely. Yes, there are a lot of areas that have a heavier or less well draining soils. And you're right, in Port St. Lucie and in parts of Fort Pierce are the same. And
Yeah.
a lot are flatland soils, but yeah, clay soils definitely don't drain well. But there are other areas. A lot of our other soils don't drain as well, and you won't find them. I went to an area that was in most cases considered well drained. I had Australian pine because that was a way for me to easily collect them because they were easily visible against that dark green.
So if you have the plants that can handle heavy moisture, then you could probably use that as a management tool, but
Yeah,
somehow while also conserving water. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Anita. I really appreciate it. That was great.
you're welcome.
Yeah. Um, and so, Ralph, did you want to go next, or would you like to go last?
I'll go next.
Okay, excellent.
Oops. Let me see about sharing here. Oh, wait a minute. Whoa. How's that?
Excellent.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. Well, again, Kara, thank you for having me here. As you can see from my title, the infamous Palmetto Weevil, A Tale of Woe, I don't like palmetto weevils, and I'm sure you don't either. because they're just emotionally draining, let's just say that. And I took this from Dr. Tom Westling's uh, original PowerPoint because it was good, and it has added some other bits and pieces to it to sort of tell the tale of this Weevil. And just a reminder, of course, if I'm from Charlotte County, and we've been in Charlotte County 90 years, and we're in every county. So thank you. So, the heartbreak of palmetto weevils. And I just know that between homeowners and other people having to deal with this, to suddenly have a beautiful, magnificent palm, whether it's a Canary Island date palm or Bismarck palm, is just devastating to people. And as you can see there, everything looked fine until it wasn't, thanks to the weevils. And there, of course, is some of their debris as far as the larva and some of the frass and such that you might experience. So, um, it's so bad that I developed a sympathy card for people who have this just to sort of soothe their nerves. So make sure you have that sympathy card or one similar ready for the end result there. So there's the palmetto weevils, and they are sizable weevils. And remember, weevils, the larvae have no legs. They just have a head capsule and a undulating body. And then the adults, and I got one right here. Oh, there it is right there. Have that rostrum, and that's got the mandibles at the end from which they can dig into the base of the fronds. And they come in different sizes and colors too, but they all have the more or less the same structure. And again, some of the bigger ones can be almost 2 inches long. So they're a sizable creature, and of course they can fly, and so that's how they get around. Sort of the vultures here. Now, the from egg to adult, I don't have a picture of an egg, is about 84 days. I'm sure it goes quicker when it's during the summer when it's very warm. Again, the larvae are massive eating machines, just a head capsule with a 2.5 inch or more size undulating body, and you're gonna find them wedged up into the base of the palm fronds, and then they chew their way into the heart of the palm. Once they have finished the larval form, then they will pupate, and you can see there a sizable pupa encased in sort of I don't want to say a cocoon, but a mass of some of the duff from the palm, and you can find those, of course, in the palm remains when you sort of do a forensic on it there. And as far as they are native to Florida, and originally they were just going after the native palms that were stressed, like cabbage palms, but we bring in all the exotic, wonderful palms, and they found another food source. And I would say, at least in Charlotte County, Canary Island date palm and Bismarck palms are their number one food source for a number of reasons. I'm guessing, again, from stress that makes those likely targets. But you can see here there's a number of different palms that you might find them on. But again, even apparently healthy Canary Island date palm and Bismarck palms have been really good targets of this. So, in general, it's hard to prevent because you may think you're doing everything right, but behind the scenes there may be some stress you don't see. And so proper cultural care as far as nutrients is going to be important, but also pruning. And with Canary Island date palms, it's certainly a object lesson and not over pruning, because a lot of people see them, oh, that's the pineapple palm, and they want them cut into that shape. I saw some figures one time that most Canary Island date palms have almost 50% of their fronds missing because people just prune too much on it. So it's going to put it in a state of stress right from the get-go. And if you look at some of the literature too, some people question whether Canary Island date palms are suitable for Florida because they're just not a desert island type um, palm. But pruning can introduce wounds which give off their own chemical scents, which will attract weevils in too. So this was me looking at one years ago, and it had some palmetto weevils, and the top frond had begun to discolor and tip a little bit. I also remember getting a huge thorn through my forearm, and I didn't even feel it. And the people said, "You're bleeding." I said, "I'm fine," but at least they were trying to take care of me. So this is just, one way to search. I would say wear armor when you're doing that, though. But sometimes you have to go up and take a look so you can get a better view of what's going on. Well, this was a Canary Island date palm. It had a certain story behind it. A landscaper had driven by this residential area and told the owner, "I would like to purchase this from you." So they made an agreement. I think it was like $3,000 for it or so. So the landscaper came and pruned it up in preparation to dig it and transport it, but he waited a little bit too long, and the Weevils found it and they just destroyed it. And so came whether it was a court case or not, who's at fault here? And pretty much, I guess the landscaper should have come and collected it a lot sooner after they had pruned it up in preparation for transport. So that was a tale of woe for sure. Um, this is this was our Bismarck palm in our demo garden, and I tell you, I thought, and I bragged, I said, "This is the best Bismarck palm in all of Charlotte County. It looks like an elephant. It's been well taken care of. It's wonderful." And then one day I looked up and I said, "Oh no." I saw that little telltale discoloration in the new fronds. I saw a little bit of a tilt, and the rest is history. It had to come down. The palmetto weevil had found it. There was no stress. I couldn't see any stress. There was no pruning. The nutrition was good, but it just seemed like, especially Bismarck's, ones that were like 10 to 15 years old were just getting wiped out. And I would say too that although Canary Island date palms, we can see a lot of the symptoms and signs of the activity. We can see holes, we can see frass, maybe some adults flying around. Sometimes the Bismarck it just happens. You don't see them working underneath. You just suddenly see that discoloration. You may also see, because of the damage and the bacterial and fungal rot that's going on, liquids coming out. And so sometimes it's a very sudden um, occurrence. So there's the weevil we got out of it. Again, you can see the size of that thing, and um, I think I pickled it afterwards just as a memento. But you can see here with one of the fates is you'll have the neck pop. So as the weevils are feeding on the base of the fronds and into the heart, of course, that's going to weaken it structurally, but it's also going to introduce bacteria and fungal problems. Again, there may also be a foul-smelling liquid that indicates that rot's occurred. And generally, the neck can pop. Or I've seen it with Bismarck palms almost slough off because it had decayed so much and was structurally so unsound. And as you're picking this apart, and often it's going to be a forensic thing afterwards, when you discover this, you'll find the weevil larva, full size, chewing into the base of the fronds and eventually working themselves into the heart. And of course, that's going to be the fatal blow. But any of this damage, of course, too, is going to attract fungal and bacterial infections, and that just helps finish it off there. And when you're examining it too, you will see that a lot of these fronds will just pull out because they've been structurally damaged so much by the larva. And again, just some more, you'll start pulling them out and you'll see all the frass, all the chewed areas. The picture here is a few pupa. So you may see a number of stages all at the same time, the larva, the adults, and the pupa hanging around there. And again, although they can fly, these damaged trees should be taken down as soon as you can because they're going to be reservoirs for this weevil. So, and again, in the past, sables, saw pimentos that were stressed were dying, and they were considered a secondary pest. They weren't really that big of a problem, but as we've introduced a number of other exotic palms, which I guess are just a lot tastier to it, they are coming in. And now along with it too, and I'll talk in a few minutes about this, the silky cane weevil. We have a number of those here. They generally go after, as far as I've seen, foxtails mostly around here. I've not seen them on canary island date palms, but they can get into them, and sometimes, although they may not kill or damage the palm a lot, it may stress it and make it more edible or attractive to the palmetto weevil. And again, once the infestations have been identified, it's pretty much the end of the line for that. Now, this was a series of pictures that I found, and I believe it was on either a nursery, but they were planted outside, and this must have been around the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. But there were 500 date palms, and they had lost all those in 1 year. Most of them were about 10 years old, but this is just a series of pictures to show how they sort of went down, almost like a collapsing umbrella. So there's the one that's looks pretty okay. They put a screen behind it to have a better picture of it. And then you start seeing a little bit of collapse going on. Doesn't look too bad. Something's going on though. And then you start seeing the top part beginning to tilt, discolor, and collapse on its own weight there. So eventually, of course, you get the total blow from the palmetto weevil activity, and then that's the end of that there. Um, and they did, and you can see here just another picture of that. They did also try to do a little illustrative about how they go down, and generally, of course, the spear leaf or the first frond is one of the ones that starts to go down. You might see some other lower ones as well begin to wilt, depending where they're feeding on them. And of course, eventually it's just a total collapse and it's done. Now, this was a Bismarck palm. I think this was in Lee County that Stephen Brown had taken a picture of. And I'll show you a video he did too, if it will play properly. But when those Bismarck palms go down, it's an enormous, it's like having a dinosaur die or something here. The top is definitely popped or sloughed off. And when you see it in this condition, it's just no going back. Now, I talked a little bit about some of the chemicals that freshly pruned palms give off. The palm esters are attractive to palmetto weevils. And you can see here, here's a Canary Island date palm, forced to be, a pineapple palm, which a lot of people like. And just imagine all the fronds that have been taken off, the stress that palm's under, and the scent that it's giving off of that stress. So in combination with the palm esters from the wounds, there's that pheromone crutental that's produced and released by male weevils. So it's an aggregation, I guess they call it pheromone. So it attracts other males and females too. So there's this weevil party attracted to this, and they start going hog wild on it. So between the esters and the crutenol, this is how it goes down as far as the final demise of this particular palm. People keep doing it. People keep hiring people to do it, but unfortunately, it's really putting it at risk. Now, I found just doing a glancing review online, there are some traps that could be uh, found. I think this is one that they use, again, using the pheromones and the esters to attract them to that. I did find some commercial ones available. I don't know how well they work, but I guess like anything, if you can place it away from the crop, the palms, it might work because how many times I've seen people use fly traps and all they do is attract flies to their house because they're putting it right next to the door. Think Japanese beetle traps too, where people would place them in their yard up north to try to get rid of them, but it was a beacon and attracted to them. So placement's very important, I think, as far as getting the weevils away from your crop. And then talk about insecticides. Now, I believe, I don't know when lindane was taken off the market, but lindane you can't use anymore. So you're left with systemic like imidacloprid. And from what I've read about this, it can be used as a prophylactic to when, when they're being planted, they're potentially at risk because they're stressed, they're trying to get reestablished, and by using the imidacloprid as a drench, this may help to ward off weevils long enough for it to become established. There's no guarantee. And with like homeowners associations, I would recommend if they're going to do it, because it's not going to be cheap and it's going to be, long term, that they only treat the palms that are in showcase areas that if they went down, it would be expensive, but also a big eyesore as far as treatments go. So again, for palms overall, I think proper fertilization, and if you look at Dr. Broschart's recommendations of an 8-2-12-4 or an 8-0-12-4, November, February, and May, as per label instructions, and then a 0-0-16-6 in August, if you have a restricted fertilizer ordinance in place, is going to help. Again, I would say from some of the literature, some people saying Canary Island date palms are just not a good match for Florida, but people love them. They're not going to go away, I don't think. If the trees are wounded by pruning, you should avoid it. And again, um, I know generally we say just remove brown fronds, no more than say the 9.3 level as far as removal. And but I think on a lot of these, especially Canary Island date palms, the fewer the better with that. And then sanitation, if there is a infested tree, it's going to be a big reservoir of beetles. And although they can fly around and they've got to find stress trees, why have that hanging around when you should just go ahead and cut it down and dispose of it and destroy the pupa and the adults and the larvae that you can find there, which is going to help a lot. Again, newly transplanted, you could try the imidacloprid, but it's going to be expensive too to protect those few trees. And I think, again, in the EDIS publications about this, it's um, not a guarantee. So, but it's probably the only tool we have right now. And so we'll try to work with that as best we can as a preventative. It's certainly not going to cure it because, of course, the beetles would have to ingest it too. But overall, I would say that Canary Island date palms and the Bismarck, especially because you look at them and say, like, they look pretty healthy. And like the one I had in the demo garden there, I thought this is the best. Nothing could touch it. And then something did. And so I sent myself a sympathy card for that one. I want to show you if it will play and let's see. This is a YouTube that Stephen Brown put together, which I always found entertaining and educational. Let's see if I can get it up to play. Oh, come on. Whoop.
They don't believe how toxic this is.
Let's get
If you're
past
still
the.
using a plastic or wooden cutting board, you need to hear this.
Yeah.
I never.
Okay, here we go.
I think it might be on your other screen.
Can you hear it?
I could hear it before. I can't hear it now, and we can't see it.
Oh, can you hear it or it's not visible?
Neither right now.
Oh, that's no good. All right, well, let's go back to our regularly scheduled program then here. All right. Oops. Hmm. Okay. So we'll skip that. But if you get a chance, take a look at Stephen Brown's YouTube because it's very good. Now, I talked a little bit about the silky cane weevil, and we have it here, but primarily it's a minor problem, and I've seen it mostly on foxtails. They get in, the sign or symptom is a brown sticky exudant that comes out where they're boring in. They're not a big weevil or anything, and generally imidacloprid will take care of it. But sometimes it's very limited. But it seems though that it could cause stress to palms and make them more likely to be attacked by the bigger palmetto weevil. So it could be a little precursor. Um, but in our county, it's minor, but it could be more abundant in other areas. So there it is on a Canary Island date palm. You can see the holes that it's done into that. I don't think I would have ever noticed that unless I really look closely. And I'm always looking at foxtails, not Canary Island date palms, as far as the damage goes. So, generally, the silky cane weevil is not overly injured. It's more of an aesthetic. It's more of an eyesore. People get panicky when they see it. It's easily taken care of, and it's generally self-limited. And other things may take care of it. So the silky cane weevil's in the background, just as something to consider as far as what might be a trigger for the palmetto weevils coming in. Okay, we talked about that. So bottom line, the battle with palmetto weevils is ongoing. It's not going to go away. There's no perfect cure. I think communication or communicating the risk to the homeowner or customer is going to be helpful to let them know what to expect and what they could do. And again, as I mentioned, at least with homeowner associations, I've just thought that it was a good idea to um, put all their money in some of their showcase palms up front if they were going to try to protect them with like a imidacloprid. And use all your IPM tools otherwise to try to keep the palms as healthy as possible. And I think there are hidden stresses on especially the Bismarck palm. And I know that years ago, I think it was in 2009 and 10, we had a freeze, and a lot of them seemed to gotten a compromise that allowed just a wave of palmetto weevils to come in and clean them out. But people like them; they grow a little quicker than you think, and so they've replaced them at this point. But otherwise, I think that this is just an ongoing problem, and um, I don't think there's a perfect solution, but I do hate them still. So thank you. Any questions?
I see there were a couple of questions in the chat
Uh,
asking about how often to scout and to have an opportunity for treatment and survival of the plants, especially for the large, expensive palms.
yeah, I think that once somebody's decided to protect it, they just got to start doing it. I don't think there's any scout because by the time you scout it, it's too late if you see
Yeah,
anything.
especially with a larger tree, you're not going to be able to.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
mean,
then
it's almost like surviving rabies. Very few people without the vaccination survive it. Yes.
Um, and the visual signs of the weevil damage have similarities to lethal bronzing and bud rot and maybe other killers of palms. Other than seeing weevil holes and live weevils, are there any other physical damage that would be weevil caused only versus being similar to the damages caused by other diseases or funguses of palms?
And that's a good question. I think the lethal bronzing though is going from the bottom up. And this one may
Mhm.
have, you may see some damage at the bottom, but if they're into the heart, of the top part of the palm, you'll see a lot more damage up there, especially as it progresses, and then you see of course, the neck pop and all that damage that goes with it. But if you're seeing that plus liquid, foul smelling liquid coming down, it's probably too late. But I would say the Bismarck is so cryptic that there's almost nothing till everything shows up all at once. At least with the Canary Island date palm, I've seen
Yeah.
some
Um, yeah,
frass
it's
and some
it's
holes, so
right. It's definitely upsetting when such large, high value palms are dying, but it's uh that it's usually when it gets to that point, there's not too much you can do. And somebody just asked, the liquid, is it coming from the top of the palm?
Um, Generally, you'll start seeing it, depending on the type of palm, just from the top, but usually leaking out from underneath the
Like the
lowest,
crown shaft,
yeah, the crown
right?
shaft there, and it will be black generally. It will smell. Sometimes it'll be flies even going towards it because it's
Mm,
attracting flies, and you may even see it flowing at some
mm,
point, depending on what point the infection's going on in there. But the weevils cause the damage, and that's just the secondary invader of it.
yeah. Um, does anybody else have any other questions? Stories that they would like to get off their chest of palms dying? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ralph. We really
Okay,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. Very
Yeah.
good.
Okay. And oh, one question. If you have to take an infected tree out, how would you destroy them? So to make sure that we're not keeping the pest alive.
Yeah, I would say that, of course, most of it is going to be in the top. So as you cut it down, try to bag up, I guess, the top infested part. And you'll see, I mean, it will just like fall apart in a big, duffy, frassy mess there with all the pupa and the larva and everything. So just try to bag that up there. And that should do it. And just put it in a bag and just, you can solarize it, I suppose, in a clear bag to kill them just so they're not going to get out and contribute to the reservoir that's out there already.
We also have one question. Are the palmetto weevils seasonal?
I would say that they're going to be year round, but when it's getting warmer, they're going to be a lot more active. And I think even their life cycle is probably a lot quicker than just because of the warmth that allows them to be again more active as a invertebrate. Certainly here in Charlotte County, I would say, December, January is going to be the least common month, but as it warms up, definitely it will become more abundant.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ralph. Appreciate it. Oh, we have a hand raised.
Got a hand raised.
So I wanted to ask this as opposed to write it in the chat. As extension agents and researchers, if we have projects, and I'll just say an unknown highway that has, say, 1,000 palms planted along X number of miles, of which close to 20% in the last 2 years have already died and or are dying, and a contractor who decided on their own against, I'll say, expert or
You're
consultant
breaking
level.
up a little bit.
What's that? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Just
Okay,
repeat it.
so the contractor put back palms once, sometimes twice over the course of another year, and those died. Do you, as extension agents, ever, answer emails and or provide a letter about, what these recommended practices are? Aside from me just, providing copies of the circulars and that, basically say what you're saying now.
I would say, we can certainly give advice and such. I think that I always bow to like a Florida certified arborist to give some kind of a certified report so that we're not expert witnesses per se there. Um,
And yeah, and I get that. And I am, 12 different expert levels, blah blah blah. So not to discuss here, but my point is sometimes experts are not believed because they're being paid to provide their expertise, even though it's
yeah.
independent. And as much as I am, a proponent and recommend always using the UF circulars and and blogs and everything as good reference information, which it is, sometimes it's worth being able to reach out to, I'll just say somebody like you, Ralph, and say, here's basically the situation, just confirming that this is what you would recommend also as a top researcher for UFI. So
And
that's
And I tell you the truth too, I might even bring in some of the Palm people at the Fort Lauderdale Research Station because there's
Yep.
Dr. McMillan and Dr. Yeah, the other guy there that does the lethal bronzing stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
always going to go to higher authorities to back me up too. Yeah.
Good answer.
Okay,
Good answer.
thank you.
Very good. Thank you for saying that,
Because
Ralph.
yeah,
Thank you.
because you guys do good work, and I want to give you the opportunity to get more credit, but that means you need to sign your name.
That's true.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, let's see if, all right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so continuing on with the, yes, continuing on with weevils, I'm going to talk a little bit about two other types of weevils that impact our landscapes, but you might not be interacting with as much as some of these other weevils. And one is a little bit more of an emerging issue, the sea grape weevil, but we're going to start off with the Mexican bromeliad weevil, which is actually the picture on the left of the screen there. So biodiversity, bromeliads are biodiversity amplifiers. They're really wonderful, one for capturing water to create these kind of micro habitats for frogs, dragonflies, lizards, beetles, all sorts of arthropods, and animals utilize. It's really important for our ecosystems to have our native and even some of our non-native bromeliads in the landscape and in our natural areas. In a single large tank style bromeliad, you can have up to 26 species of arthropods living there, which makes it a really exceptional micro habitat biodiversity amplifier for our landscapes and natural areas. So Florida does have 16 native bromeliads. They are predominantly seen as air plants, what we think of as air plants. 10 of those 16 are listed as threatened or endangered due to several reasons, but loss of habitat is the biggest reason. Illegal collecting, because some of them are endangered or very rare throughout our native ecosystems and landscapes, and so there has been a lot of illegal collection happening. And now also the non-native Mexican bromeliad weevil is devastating some of the populations of a few of our native bromeliad species. So here's a list of our native bromeliads and whether they're threatened or endangered or in safe population zones. But as you can see on the top part of the list, the cardinal air plant and the giant air plant are both endangered basically because of the Mexican bromeliad weevil. And that's really discouraging and problematic just because those are the larger air plants that we have, the native air plants, and so they do create those microhabitats at a larger scale than some of the smaller air plants. So it's important that we do retain those in natural areas, and so the fact that this non-native weevil is coming in and causing population issues for those two large air plants is problematic on multiple levels. So sometimes it's referred to as the evil weevil and the giant air plant. So the Mexican bromeliad weevil was found in Fort Lauderdale in 1989. So a while, not super recently. And it was in a bromeliad nursery. It was imported on plants from Veracruz, Mexico. So that's kind of why we call it the Mexican bromeliad weevil. The nursery treated with insecticide its plant material, but then 2 months later, the weevil had spread and was found in southern Palm Beach County and then also throughout northern Broward County. So even though the nursery did try to treat for the weevil, it still was able to escape that cultivated environment and was found throughout then 2 counties. Then in 1998, Tillandsia utriculata and Tillandsia fasciculata were added to the list of Florida endangered species, and that is mostly because of the Mexican bromeliad weevil damage that was occurring. It currently does not have any known natural enemies, and there are 2 other species of Metamassus that do live in Florida. One is one is native, and one is actually a pest for sugarcane, bananas, and palms, which is actually the silky weevil that Ralph talked about, that picture on the right, bottom right. But we do have a native species that is not problematic. It does exist within Florida, and it doesn't have any sort of great damaging cause that it's incurring on our native landscapes. So this is what the life cycle of the Mexican bromeliad weevil looks like. So we have the egg, larva, and then it does cocoon or pupate, and then becomes the adult. So it's an egg in its egg stage for less than 10 days. But this is so then it after 10 days it'll hatch and become the larval stage, which does a lot. That's where most of the damage is occurring, similar to the palm weevil, and the Sri Lankan weevil with the root system of plants. This is consuming the leaves and kind of that central area of your bromeliads and of the air plants, and so it's eating through that, and it'll actually it'll loosen that central spike, and so it ends up killing the bromeliads. That's why we have some of those species that are endangered. Then it does create a cocoon with all of the duff that it creates with eating through your bromeliads. And that cocoon pupa exists for just over 10 days. With the shredded material that it kind of creates around it, it pulls it around it. And then after it pupates, we have this adult weevil that can fly around and does get moved around with bromeliads, but it does fly and is able to then move around and find other populations to lay its eggs and start the process over again. But one of the major concerns is that the adult does live for over 150 days on average. So that's not great, because that does give it a lot of opportunity to spread eggs throughout the bromeliad populations and do more damage. So the evil weevil and the giant air plant. So here's examples of the damage that can be done to our air plants. This is Tillandsia utriculata on the picture on the left. And so what happens is they'll damage the air plant to the point where that center pulls out and the plant dies. And again, it's most often with the larger tank style bromeliads. So it consumes the leaf tissue. The larva will consume the leaf tissue, tunnel into the stem system, produce these large holes, dislodge the plant eventually, and the plant dies. So you'll notice this kind of gelatinous brown material when you do have larvae present on your bromeliads. That's one signal that you have an infestation. But again, it's difficult to once you do see that, you probably are not going to be saving that plant. It also impacts other bromeliads outside of just native bromeliads. So we have pineapples, Ichmea, neuralgias, and other species. You can see how it's impacting the pineapple plant in this top left picture, as well as the fruit of pineapple, the pineapple fruit. that it'll impact the larva will eat that as well. So, I mean, South Florida used to be a large producer of pineapple, but a lot of homeowners grow them ornamentally as well as for food. So it's an important pest to think about with our own landscapes outside of just the native wild air plants and bromeliads that are out there, that this can and will impact native landscapes along with those native bromeliads. Management is pretty tough. There was an attempt to find a biological solution. So a parasitoid tachnid fly from Honduran cloud forest, which actually is the native, it's a biological native management of a weevil that a related weevil that's found in Honduran, in the Honduran cloud forest. It was released here in 2007, 2008, and was not found to be successful. That was not, the population did not stick around. It did not parasitize the Mexican bromeliad weevil at the rates that were necessary. Now the weevil that's found in the Honduran cloud forest is a smaller weevil, so potentially that was one of the issues. Or just that it wasn't interested in this particular species. So that's a little bit unfortunate. That was a kind of a hopeful project to be able to help the native bromeliad populations, and then also the ornamental ones. Chemical. It's not, especially with the native management in ecologically sensitive areas that we have in South Florida, especially, it's not a really viable option because those areas might be inaccessible, and state and county parks are not necessarily permitted to use these insecticides due to possible effects on non-target organisms. So really thinking about managing so that we're not impacting beneficial insects while trying to control this weevil. So ornamental bromeliad nurseries can use the reduced concentration insecticide labeled for beetles and grubs as a preventive, and there's also preventive sprays or dipping every 2 to 3 months that get done as well. So if you're in the ornamental industry, you can use insecticides. However, in natural areas, it is not recommended. Prevention, there are more than 20 species of weevils known to attack bromeliads, and several have been found in shipments of bromeliads from the neotropics. So one of the things that is really being stressed is treating plants before shipment and once they're received. So doing that kind of that dip method to prevent bringing in the weevil and or other new insects and potential pests, and treating the plants also then once they're received, kind of get it on both sides to make sure that we're not getting any new introductions to our ornamental and eventually potentially our native ecosystems. So right now the best option though is purchasing seed for bromeliads rather than plants from the neotropic area. So that's something to think about if you're in the nursery trade, that if you're going to be growing these plants, instead of purchasing plants from overseas, perhaps purchase seed and start your own plants. So this is some pictures from talking more about trying to save the giant air plant as well as the cardinal air plant in Florida. So trying to save Florida's native bromeliads. There was a concerted effort between Fakahatchee Strand State Park, the Friends of the Fakahatchee, Naples Botanical Garden, and Marie Selby Botanical Garden. They worked together to save the genetics. So they got permits to go harvest some of these bromeliads from native lands or from natural lands, and then brought them back to their respective botanical gardens and greenhouses to continue to grow them until they flowered, collected the seeds, and started new plants, and then reintroduced them to try to increase the population. So that was successful, but it's something that right now with the weevil and how it's reducing the populations in natural areas, that's probably something that's going to have to continue to increase those populations around those native, especially the Fakahatchee Strand State Park, which is a really beautiful ecosystem. So again, those conservation efforts, they went out. Here's some more pictures of that group of folks together and going out and doing uh, some surveying of the bromeliads, and you can see the small starts that they have on that picture in the upper left. So now the sea grape weevil. So this is a much smaller weevil than the Mexican bromeliad weevil, and this is damaging significantly more of our built-out landscape. So our pigeon plums are really where we see it. So the picture on the right is actually pigeon plum that's at part of our Palm Beach County Extension. We're connected with the Mounts Botanical Garden here in Palm Beach County, and this is what the damage can look like on pigeon plums from the sea grape weevil. It's a tiny little weevil. It's hard to see, and you have to kind of shake out some of the leaves and have a white piece of paper, a clean piece of paper that you'll be able to see it. But they're tiny, they're little goofy looking guys, but they do a lot of damage and can really harm your trees. So again, they're really small. You can see the frass that it's leaving behind, but you can also see these trails here through that are kind of cutting through the picture and the image, and it does a scraping motion. Scraping is how it really feeds because it is so small that it scrapes at the leaves. And here's some more pictures of the damage that the sea grape picture on the left, and then pigeon plum on the right. In my experience and what we've seen here in Palm Beach County, and Henry, you can talk to this as well if you want, that it's really been more damaging on pigeon plums, and which has been a fabulous tree, small, medium-sized tree for landscapes, and it's because of this weevil, we're not recommending it as much because this damage can be quite significant. And if the tree is already stressed, has other stressors like being in the built up landscape, or think about parking lots, that you can end up having the tree die once it's exposed to this much damage. So the scarring from the scrape style feeding is pretty significant. So as you can see, these leaves have reduced photosynthesis opportunity because of the damage from that weevil. Again, here's some more pictures of the weevil and its damage. Right now, we really don't know a whole lot about the weevil. If you go online, I mean, University of Florida does not have a whole lot of information. And honestly, there's not a whole lot of study that's been published that you can find on it. So again, the biggest impact is Cocoloba diversifolia, or pigeon plum, and Cocoloba ovifera, sea grape. It is larval stage feeding habits have not been reported. That's something that is unknown at this time. And chemical control with insecticide label for control of foliar weevils may help, but it's something that we need more information and more study done. We have really started to talk with some of our researchers, entomology researchers, up in Gainesville, to say, hey, this is becoming a pretty significant issue that maybe it needs to be more on the radar, and we need to start really looking into how to control this, because these are, again, we're dealing with potentially high value landscape trees that the cost to remove and replace is sometimes high, and we don't, if we can avoid that type of work in the landscape, we would like to try to do that. So working to understand this weevil, understand its larval habits, as well as then how we can control it and manage it in the landscape. So that's kind of the update for the Mexican bromeliad weevil and that sea grape weevil. I know that doesn't really necessarily provide a whole lot of answers, especially with the sea grape weevil, but just kind of sharing that we know that it's a problem, and we are bringing it up to folks who will hopefully be engaging with us here in South Florida, so that we can work to create better solutions for landscape professionals, because it is a problem. So that is, let's see, does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns?
Yeah, I mean, you've stated the obvious. That is a huge problem. I work for a large landscape contractor, where we are planting tons
Mm,
of Egypt plum. Seems to be if they can't figure out another species, almost seems to be the default.
Yeah.
So I deal with a ton of them and have seen this damage, not understanding how to properly identify these. You said with a white piece of paper, can
Yeah.
you can
So
hold that under a branch, shake, and see if what lands on it.
right. So I mean, again, they're very tiny. So if you have a hand lens or something with you,
Yep.
that'll be helpful, or just bring it back to a microscope. But yes, so if you start to see damage on a tree, you can kind of shake the leaves or shake a branch over a white piece of paper. Or I mean, we happened to the day that we were looking at them on the trees that are on the property where we work, that we had a bright blue folder, but having something to kind of catch them, you'll be able to see them. But they're super tiny, and they'll be kind of then running around on the piece of paper. But that's the best way to check. But honestly, a really easy way is you'll see that damage. So then, but yeah, I know that Henry and John, are my colleague here in Palm Beach. The three of us were on an email chain recently with one of the entomologists in Gainesville, bringing this up and saying, hey, this is something that we really need to work on, because it's become a significant issue. Because you're right, pigeon plums, they're a great tree. It's a wonderful size, a growth habit that is really ideal for the built landscape, and this becoming a problem where the damage really reduces the one, attractiveness of tree, but that can, over time, the amount of damage can cause death, because if it gets infested too much with other stressors, we've seen them die. So I don't know if Henry, if you have anything that you wanted to share about it, or
If I may, before you answer, Henry,
yeah.
because you may be able to add something to your response, but so you mentioned chemical treatment may help, um,
Mhm.
but no elaboration on that. What chemical, and what type of application?
So I mean, right now, it's basically saying it the same chemicals that you would use for other um, beetles or weevils that are chewing, biting insects, that using that as a potential um, application. So I mean, we didn't have anything that was specific as to use this chemical. It was follow biting, chewing, beetle insecticides, label rates for that. Because yeah, I mean, since we don't know much about its habits, that it's tough to make that recommendation.
Yeah, if we can add, Cara, yeah, we would need some type of research, and you're right. I mean, the Dr. Bush and Alexander Evintin, Trek, and there's some people involved. If you can send us some, maybe Terrell, if you can send us some emails about, the importance of this, because IFAS resources are very, very, very thin, but if the industry show type of problem, we can make a case to at least to get some type of research in this type. I'm seeing a lot of pigeon plum, more damage when the pigeon plum are in the streets or in parking lot than natural areas. So I don't know if this is
Yeah.
some related to you guys, when we have a lot of concrete or asphalt. I mean, I guess they increase the population of this, but again, there has to be some type of research.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
That's right, Henry. Yeah, that's a great point. So especially with insects like this, that having landscape professionals kind of justify the need for it is really helpful, because showing the financial impact that it has on your business and as well as your customers will get us more support, to actually initiate people to do the research, because yeah, it's super important. And I mean, we see it, we're all seeing it in the landscape, but we're here in South Florida, and sometimes the folks in Gainesville don't necessarily, they need a little bit of that support to show that it is impacting financially our landscape professionals and our landscape. So we would appreciate any kind of emails and pictures and um, that to help justify us pushing further. Yeah. So does anybody have any other questions, comments, anything they'd like to share? Let's see. So one question I see is about agave weevil and bromeliad weevil. They are not the same genus. And as far as I know, I don't believe that they have crossover in host plants. Uh, that the agave weevil tends to stick to agave plants, and the bromeliad weevil has been pretty has been found really only on bromeliads, native and non-native bromeliads. Another question. I have a neighbor, a couple of houses with diseased palm. If this is a case of weevil, should I be worried about my palms? Well, if it is weevils, then perhaps, because once the larva becomes an adult, it could fly to they're eventually going to leave that palm, that single palm. But I mean, without confirmation that it is weevils, I wouldn't say that you should be necessarily very worried. But um, if there's an issue with that palm, she probably need a landscape professional to come check it out and identify what the issue is. Have it either see if it is weevils, or have it tested to identify what the pest or disease is that is causing the problem. Okay, well, I'm going to launch the post test, post quiz. So if everybody would do that, and then if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat, and we're here to answer anything you have. Okay, so I am going to end the poll. Yeah, so let's let me see. Oops. Okay, so we'll go over the questions really quick. So the pheromone Kruntal, I don't think I'm saying that correctly, attracts other males and female palmetto weevils. 94% of you got it correct. That is true. It does attract other palmetto weevils. The entire life cycle of the palmetto weevil from egg to adult takes 84 days. And that is also true. Or I'm sorry, that is false. Actually, it does not take 84 days. Besides preventing their own pruning and keeping palms, besides preventing over pruning and keeping palms as stress-free as possible, the use of lindane as a prophylactic treatment for palmetto weevils is recommended. That is false. Lindane is no longer allowed to be used. It is not available anymore. Where is Sri Lankan weevil from? The correct answer is Sri Lanka. What parts of the plant do Sri Lankan weevils damage? The options were leaves, stems, trunk, flowers, roots, leaves and roots, or flowers and roots. The correct answer is leaves and roots. Sri Lankan weevils spread by elements, wind, or carried by water. That is false. They are predominantly spread through container plant material, the movement of, as Dr. Neal referenced that they showed up in Washington State after containerized plant material that had the larva in the root system were moved there. So it's actually predominantly through either some flying, but most from containerized plant material. The Mexican bromeliad weevil is responsible for some of Florida native Tillandsia's air plants being listed as endangered. That is true. And Pyrrhizus tuberculatus sea grape weevil damages trees by burrowing into the trunk, and that is false. It does it by scraping at the leaves and causing problems that way with photosynthesis. And so yes, thank you everybody for joining us. Again, we have another webinar that will be on August 12th about scale insects. I know that Henry and John have put those Zoom links into registrations into the chat. So if you would, you can click on those or save them for later to register if you're available. But that'll be coming up on August 12th. Again, same time from 10 to 12. But if anybody has any other questions, so if you registered, you would have added your license numbers and everything through the registration, and so we'll put it into the system, the FDAC system, or if there's something else that you need that wasn't included, please send us through email. I'll put my email in the chat. You can email me your license numbers and what you're looking for your CEUs. We have FNGLA, FDACs, and I think LIAF. But that is my email address. So please email me if you have any questions about your CEU credits for this webinar. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, please let us know, reach out. We're here for you, and hopefully these weevils will find other places and other things to eat that are less important to our landscapes. But thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.